tells the story of two men who were thrown into a dark dungeon for a sentence of 10 years. But right before they went in, one of the men found out that his wife and child had died. And the other man found out that his wife and children were alive, and they were waiting for him to get out. Now you can guess what happened. The first man, he just curled up and died. He gave up. He didn't see any reason to go on. He had nothing to look forward to. But the second man, he remained strong. He endured, and 10 years later, he walked out a free man. Two men facing the same circumstance in entirely different ways based on how they saw the future. The now was controlled by the then. We live in a culture that has a very pessimistic and gloomy view of the future. I find that people are afraid. Now makes us scared about then. Statistics show that many parents believe their child's generation is going to be worse off in the future than their own. And it causes worry. College students wonder if there are going to be any good jobs for them after investing all of that time and money in their education, and it brings stress. I know a lot of us wonder, what is the future of health care going to be like? We don't know. And we don't like it. And when we don't like it, when we don't like what today looks like, we are tempted to push God out of our lives and try to control what tomorrow looks like, just like Adam and Eve first did in that Garden of Eden. They had the presence of God in such a communal, unique, wonderful way. And then the devil comes to them with this simple, craftily worded question: did God really say? Are you sure that you are going to follow God today just because he says what might happen tomorrow? And they fell for the trick. And so do we. In so many various ways, we push God right out of our lives. And our culture just keeps on pushing. Push God out of our schools. Push God out of our government. Push God out of our families. Push God out of our friendships. Push God out of our vocations. Push God out of our bedrooms. Push God out of our money. Push God out of our decision-making. Push God out of our televisions. Push God out of our art and our music. Push God out of our thoughts. Push God out of our hearts. And push God out of our future. And do you know what the result of all that pushing is? Not only do we never find what we're looking for today, we never get content. We just keep on pushing, looking for more and more. But the ultimate result is that we're the ones who get pushed out. We're pushed right out of God's presence. A holy God pushes sin and its stench away from him, just like he expelled Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. There becomes a division between us and him that now needs to be bridged. What I just said is very, very hard for modern-day American listeners to understand. It makes the spread of biblical Christianity that much more difficult in our context. And a person who believes that people are basically good and that when you die, everybody goes to heaven except for maybe a few terrorists or child molesters isn't really going to get much out of a message like this today. Because there are people who have no concept of a God who just might be justified in being angry with us. See, we tend to think that God should be the one thanking us for taking time out of our busy schedules to come and acknowledge him, especially if we think it's a little too much time. People think of him like Santa Claus, inviting us to sit on his lap, and he's there to give us what we want when we want it. Sure, we might make mistakes, but nothing too serious, and certainly we can make up for those mistakes by doing a few religious things. But we can't make up for them. Even if we were willing to sit through the longest sermon ever preached, the Bible tells us it still would not be enough to regain the presence of God, because our sins expose us. They send us hiding from God so that we don't have to confront the honest truth about ourselves. They shame us. And if it were left up to us and our power, do you know what our futures would hold? The absence of God, darkness, emptiness, death. But Revelation says today something amazing, something that changes this world, the only thing that changes this world. It tells us that our future can be bright and it can be full of life, and it tells us the right one to depend on. See, there can be a restored relationship. The light of the Lamb can bring us into the presence of God forever. To get there, Revelation says, where God is the temple, to get there, let's go back to another series of temples where we see how all this happens. See, for a period of time in the Old Testament, God dealt with his people by locating himself in the temple. That's where his mercy to them was revealed. It's a place where God said, this is where you can come and find me and worship me. It was the center of a person's religious life, not unlike a church is today. But there was something very different about this temple when compared to a church in modern-day America. The temple had restricted access to it. Not everyone could go deep inside to its heart, to its center. It seemed like there was still this barrier between people and the presence of God. Now, that sounds odd to us because we want our church doors to fly open, and we want whoever wants to come in and be with us. But at the temple in Jerusalem, the people could come to the outer edges, and then they were told to stop. Now, why was that? Well, think about a time when you were a kid and you had to learn the hard way about the danger of looking directly into the sun. Immediately, that sun hurt your eyes, and you needed to cover them up to be protected. The sun's an amazing thing. It needs to be close enough to us to provide us warmth, and yet it needs to be far enough away from us that it doesn't burn up our bodies. The sun says, come this far, but no further, just like God said at the temple.